Welcome to Scoop and Scale, where we dish up the science and weigh the facts about mostly equine nutrition. I'm Jill Jackson, lifelong equestrian, podcast producer, and pony owner. I'm a dressage rider, an at-home horse keeper, living the challenge of managing easy keepers on multiple acres of pasture.
And I'm equine nutrition consultant, Dr. Claire Tunis of Clarity Equine Nutrition. I develop diet plans for horses ranging from metabolic seniors to Olympic athletes. I also consult for equine nutrition companies. I'm a scientist, dressage rider, and pony club mom.
Claire and I have been horse friends for almost 20 years, and like all good horse friends, we're always talking horses. We talk about the challenges of managing our horses, our riding struggles, feeding horses, and what's going on in the wider equine community. This podcast is a place for us to have conversations mostly about equine nutrition. It's for anyone who wants to make better choices when it comes to feeding their horses.
And before we get started, a quick disclaimer. The information in this podcast is general and not meant to replace the individualized advice of your own qualified equine nutritionist or veterinarian. And while I have a PhD in nutrition, I'm not a veterinarian and can't give medical advice.
With that, thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the following episode. I was on Facebook the other day and I saw a post from somebody that said, "I feel so guilty every time I put the grazing muzzle on my horse." And I responded in the comments by saying, wouldn't you feel even more guilty if your horse got laminitis and you had the knowledge to prevent it? I feel the exact opposite when I put my horse's grazing muzzle on. I'm so happy my horse gets to go out and move around, and I'm happy he gets to socialize with his friends, and I've never felt guilty about it. And that's when I decided that we should do an episode on this. And hopefully we can help some people use muzzles guilt-free.
Oh, yes. Those that know Jill knows that she's not afraid of tough love. I'm in a new boarding situation this spring, and it's likely that my daughter's pony will be faced with more grass than he's had access to in the 6+ years that we've owned him. Apparently, there's enough grass at this new facility in the summer that it has to be mowed. If that's the case, and given we typically go away for a few weeks in the summer and he won't be in work, I may have to put him in a muzzle for the first time. And you know what? I kind of understand how people can feel guilty. I feel this slight tightening in my stomach, and it does seem a shame that I finally get him to a location where there's this grass and that I need to muzzle him. But Jill, you're absolutely right, because I've nursed a pony through laminitis and it was a horrific experience and I wouldn't wish it on any horse or anybody. So for me, the feeling bad about possibly having to use a muzzle is a fleeting feeling and observation. And I don't let it become guilt, because if we end up there, I know better than to feel guilty about it. I hope we can help some people embrace the very real benefit of muzzling horses and ponies when necessary during our conversation today, and help people feel a little less guilty about the thought of having to put a muzzle on their horse.
I agree. We're going to make this happen. We're going to let people muzzle their horses guilt-free. So let's start at the beginning by answering why we use grazing muzzles.
I think most of the time they're used in a pasture grazing situation, right? And the obvious answer is that they reduce the amount of pasture grass a horse consumes. So what people may not be aware of, though, is by how much they can reduce intake.
Okay, tell us, how much can they reduce intake?
Well, as you can imagine, this has been researched a little bit, and anywhere from 30 to just over 80%, which is huge.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah, there was a study done in ponies that showed that across seasons, using a muzzle reduced intake from 77 to 83% during a 3-hour grazing period. And unmuzzled ponies ate at least 1% of their body weight in dry matter in 3 hours.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is. I mean, so, think about it. If you can reduce your horse's pasture intake by 80%, I mean, that's a huge reduction in calorie consumption, sugar consumption, all of that. I mean, it becomes a great weight management tool.
For sure. That's why I don't feel guilty. So I'm just going to keep saying that through the whole episode. Another reason I don't feel
messaging.
guilty.
We're going to subliminal message this, don't feel guilty.
Correct. Who should be using a muzzle and when should they be using one?
Yeah, so I mean, I think, if you struggle, if your horses are out on pasture and you struggle to kind of maintain them at a good body condition score in that sort of 5 to 6, BCS range, right? We have an episode on body condition scoring. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say a BCS of 5 or 6, go check out that episode. And I'd really encourage everybody to body condition score and get a weight estimate on their horses at this time of year. And as you go through the spring and summer, keep frequently body condition scoring your horse. And, if you're inching up over a BCS of 6 and you want to keep your horses out on that pasture, I would argue that a muzzle is a great way of, being able to keep them out, roaming around, having access to movement, access to their friends, but, controlling their calorie intake. Another good time to use a grazing muzzle is, if you have a horse, I think you're kind of in this situation, right? Where you have some insulin resistance, potentially. That's, again, you're going to reduce that sugar intake. Now, I think it's worth saying that for some insulin resistant horses, they shouldn't even be out on a pasture with a muzzle on. Right. And I think you're very diligent because you do frequent blood work on your horses and you I think you've done it after they've grazed, right? You've put them out on pasture and then done it a couple hours later to see what they look like.
Yep, we've done it both ways. And I also use inserts in my muzzles, which we're going to talk about later. So that even reduces it further than just the grazing muzzle.
Mm-hmm. So those are my two main, for weight management, regardless of whether your horse is insulin resistant or not. And then, because I don't think of I don't think your horses are ever overweight, probably because you use muzzles. but for you, it has the added benefit of kind of controlling the amount of sugar that they're consuming as well. So those are the two big ones. And then I've actually used a muzzle on my daughter's pony when we were preparing for scoping for ulcers, and he had to be starved overnight, and it was the second time we were scoping him. And the first time I starved him overnight.
Hold on. Let's just quickly change that because people already have a hang up about holding back food from their horses for scoping. You did not starve him overnight.
Well, I think he thought he was being starved overnight, but you're right. We withheld food for 12 hours.
Correct.
He was pretty convinced he was being starved overnight the first time we did it, so he ate his shavings.
Yes.
So I used a grazing muzzle in that situation. The next time we had to scope him so that he didn't eat his shavings, waiting for us to come in the morning to take him to the vet to get scoped. So that's another time to use a grazing muzzle that people might not think about.
Are you going to tell them what I told you before you put that muzzle on, or are we doing that later on?
We can do that now. So I bought just the standard, grab it at your feed store type muzzle, cloth canvas muzzle. And it had 2 attachments, right? You put your halter on, breakaway halter on, and you put the muzzle on, and it just attaches with these 2 tabs on either side, sort of at the cheek piece area of the halter. And Jill did say to me that I should also put a piece of baling twine or something on the front, bridge of his nose, to connect the muzzle at the bridge of the nose, because otherwise he might get it off. And I put this thing on and fit it, and we'll get into fitting muzzles later. And it looked pretty secure and very much on his nose. And I thought, I don't need a bit of string on the nose of this muzzle. What is she talking about? And went off, it's about 8, 9 o'clock at night. And off I went home. Well, the next morning I rolled up at 8 o'clock to load him, to put him in the trailer for his gastroscoping. And lo and behold, he was very proudly wearing the muzzle under his chin. And it was doing absolutely nothing to prevent him from eating his shavings, which thankfully he didn't appear to be eating the shavings that time. But yes, I did in fact need the little extra strap.
Moral of the story is fit
Jill
the
is
muzzle
the
properly.
expert. Yeah.
And sometimes you have to use other adjustments to make sure that they stay on. We'll talk about that later on.
Yeah, Jill is definitely our resident muzzle expert. So yes, but yeah, it was amusing. He was very proud of himself. He was all twinkly eyes and ear pricked and look what I did. And I was like, oh my goodness.
So I mentioned at the beginning that I don't feel bad putting muzzles on, and I never have felt bad putting them on. So why do you think people struggle with this? Like, why do people feel bad using them?
Yeah, I think, it just doesn't fit the image we have of horses freely grazing on lush open pastures, right? I mean, I think when we think horses grazing, we see them on these beautiful green acres and acres, and that's sort of what we're fed, believe they should be eating. The problem is that the pastures that we all dream of our horses being on are not what they evolved eating, right? I mean, we've been fed this kind of like Hollywood version of what horse pasture should look like. And for most of us, that's a pasture filled with improved grass species that were designed to put weight on cattle. And it's fake, right? And it's a far cry from the low nutritional value grass that would have existed on, say, the prairies back in the day, the horses where they evolved. So, we keep hearing that the solution to all our horses' issues is pasture turnout, that they'll be, you know, happier and able to fulfill all their sort of like life goals as a horse if they're out on pasture. What we don't hear is, what fixes those issues for the most part is not the grass itself as much as it is being out in the open and being able to move and having friends to interact with. And frankly, they could interact with their friends, get movement, all those kinds of things on a dirt lot, right? So it's not the grass itself that is going to fix those issues per se. It's being out in a herd, being in the open, being able to move. And yes, obviously, grazing and eating constantly is very good for the digestive tract and will hopefully fix a number of GI type issues. But again, it's, not these Hollywood bright green, beautiful pastures that we all have in our minds as what horses should eat. That's not what they evolved on. And so, and the reality is all of those interactions, the movement, being with friends, all of that, as you said earlier, that can all happen wearing a muzzle, right? So when we're in these pasture settings, I mean, we've talked about your pasture in our last episode. I mean, you have so much grass in the summer. I mean, your pastures are filled with examples of species that are, were developed in research settings for cattle. Right? They're not what horses evolved on. And so, yeah, you end up with 3 foot high. I don't know if people saw the picture you posted on our social media, but I mean, like Dash was like half up to his elbows, literally up to his elbows in grass. You've got so much grass. Like that is not the kind of situation that horses evolved on, right? So I think we have this image and then the muzzle is sort of in dissonance to this sort of Hollywood image of, what we think horses should be eating. So I think that's why people feel bad about it, right? It doesn't fit the image that we've been led to believe that horses should have.
I also had somebody that commented on that same post that the horses couldn't groom each other with their muzzles on. And that's also... Yeah. Well, yeah and no. Can they take their teeth and like actually groom? No, but they can still like do the motion. And I think I can find a picture on one of the muzzle pages of horses doing that. And they're still getting the same relationship out of it. And they're still scratching each other. They just don't have their actual teeth on it. So again, with, somebody saying like another reason or another barrier, well, they don't get to be like in the same type of a social setting and do horse things. Well, they do. There's just an adjustment to them. They're just a little different.
I'm sure on a hot day, your two is still standing nose to tail, flicking flies off each other. And, that still happens. And I will say too, I mean, like in your setup, I mean, you have your dirt lot where they go out without their muzzles on. So they do have opportunities to interact with each other, and I think that would be sort of an ideal situation, right? Is where they do get to spend a part of the day, without their muzzles on and together in a dirt lot situation, and they can get all their grooming and, bitey face games and what have you out of the way. Although I know yours play bitey face with their muzzles on, so
exactly. It's all the same.
It doesn't stop it. So I would consider you somewhat of a muzzle expert at this point, since you've got 2 ponies that wear them routinely. And I think you've worked through a lot of pitfalls and that folks might face. So I have some questions for you.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so I own two different muzzles, and they're completely different from each other. And I know that there are more out there than that. I think you've tried at least 3 different styles. Can you talk a little bit about the different ones you've tried and kind of how they differ?
Yep. So the one that you mentioned first is the kind that you can get at, your local feed store, local tack store, which is a fabric. Tough One makes one. Like most brands make this muzzle, and it looks like a basket. It's got like a thicker nylon weave on it. And in the bottom of it, there is a piece of plastic and a circular hole that the grass comes through and the horses can eat. And so this attaches over their head. You don't have to have a special halter, and it's Velcro and it breaks away. So that basket, a lot of people use that basket. And again, there's a few variations of it, and they've done some adjustments to it to give it some more breathing room over the nostrils. My horse hated that muzzle, but I think that muzzle works really well in certain climates. At the time, we were in a hot climate, and I think he felt really restricted by how thick the nylon was. It was pretty hot on his face.
Yeah.
And the mesh on it, it's just not quite as open. And again, they have made adjustments to that, and there are new ones on the market of that. But that one, the price point on it, I think is under $40. It's like $35 for that.
Yeah, and it's made out of like
Nylon.
1-inch nylon webbing, right? And
Correct.
And like I said, I bought the one that had these like little Velcro tabs that I had to attach to a halter. But to your point, I've seen one that has a great big long nylon strap, kind of like the crown piece on a halter that goes all the way up over their ears and then kind of snaps on the other side.
Correct.
As well. So it's kind of like two forms of that. I would think, I don't know. I think my guy would just rub that off if he just had the strap that went over the head without a halter. But I guess it depends on the horse.
Depends on the horse. It depends, for every muzzle you use, you want to make sure that you're on a breakaway. So whether you're using the halter from the manufacturer that goes with the muzzle or you're using it on your own halter, you always have to have a breakaway if you're going to be using it. The other thing I found with this muzzle is it depends on the climate that you live in. If you live somewhere that's really humid and your grass is really dewy in the morning, that nylon can cause some irritation to the nose. So it doesn't dry out very well. So it depends like what time of the day you're grazing. Are you going to be able to take it off? Is it going to be able to dry? If you're in a humid area that's got a lot of wet grass in the morning, they don't dry very quickly. So you've got to be taking the time to clean it. They can get really stinky, and you need to be checking your horse's muzzle for rubs, fungus, that type of thing. So
that makes sense, yeah. The muzzle of their nose, not the muzzle that you're putting on the nose.
Correct. So that is one option. It's easy to get your hands on. If you want to try one, again, there's lots of companies that make them. Most of them are under $40, so easy.
It's not a big investment. But I think it's worth saying that I think sometimes what happens is that, because I went this way, right? Because I just needed something quick and dirty for that gastroscoping situation, that I went out and bought the $40 muzzle. But if you try that and it doesn't work for you, don't then go, well, muzzling just doesn't work for my horse. I'm done with muzzling, right? Because to your point, there are other kinds. So what are the other kinds that are out there? Because they may work better than that. I don't want people to write off muzzling in general just because they don't have a good experience with the most, the easy muzzle they can grab tomorrow at the feed store kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's the reason why I've tried 3 of them, because I was trying one that would work. And you can find a lot of used ones online. So you can always try and find one online that's already used. If your horse likes it, then you can order a new one from the manufacturer. So the next one we'll talk about is the thin line, flexible filly muzzle.
I have that one too.
Yes. So this one looks like a big plastic star. A star with lots of spokes.
Yeah, or like a flower or something.
It's like flower. So this is like a big piece of plastic. And once again, it's just got a circle in the bottom where the grass is going to come through. So the horse's nose goes in it, and then there's a circle in the bottom. They come in different size openings, and then they're just eating out of that grass. Now, this one, you can attach it to any halter. Again, only use a breakaway halter with your muzzle. and you use zip ties. And so you go around and you zip tie this to the noseband of the halter.
Yeah, so it's like each petal of the flower has a hole in it.
Correct.
And you fold the petal around the noseband of your halter and then like zip tie it back to itself.
Correct.
And then you do the next one and you do the same thing. And there's like
a lot
10 of them, like 10 petals, something like that. Like it's maybe more. It's
might
a
be
lot.
more than that. It's a lot of them. So you have to get the really tiny zip ties. They make like a 3-inch zip tie that you can do, and you go around and you do this. And lots of people really like this muzzle. So
and zip tie it so the ends of the zip tie are on the outside, not on the inside.
Absolutely, because
otherwise it's going to poking your horse.
More rub marks. Yeah, and lots of people like this muzzle. It takes a little bit to fit it properly, and because you're putting all these zip ties on, you want to make sure you have it the right spacing before you put them all on. So just put like 3 or 4 on, around each side so that you can make sure that the actual spacing from the horse's nose to the bottom of the muzzle is correct. Otherwise, you've got to put them all on and then you take them all off.
Yeah. Exactly. I admit that I talking about used ones, a friend had one. I bought it from her. I got it to the barn to use it for this one-off like time gastroscoping situation. And I just honestly, I looked at it and went, I just can't even. And so that's when I got the other, I had the other one as well. And I just ended up using that. But yeah, it's a little bit of a time investment to get the fit just where you need it to be. One of the reasons I think people like it, it's clear. So you can't see it. So from a distance, when you look at your horse in the pasture, it doesn't look like they're wearing a muzzle. So from the guilt standpoint,
try this one if you feel guilty.
You can pretend your horse isn't wearing a muzzle because it's clear plastic. You can still see their face through it. And from a distance, it'll just look like they're wearing a halter.
Exactly. I don't know if that's true, but it could be. You definitely can't see it very well. A lot of people like this if you have a horse that is a bit of a Houdini, because it does have a lot of attachments to the halter. And so it's harder for them to eat around or eat out of it or get it off of their face. And this is definitely depending on how smart your horse or your pony is and how much they really want that grass. There's lots of adjustments that sometimes you have to make to get them, on a perfect fit. It also, this one, same thing. I don't think personally, the ventilation wasn't right for me. And you will want to check the temperature in there, see how much condensation is building up, and just see if your horse is breathing okay through it. And same with all the muzzles. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing to think about too, is that if they have a pink nose and you're putting clear plastic over it, it's getting hotter, you're going to want to be just keeping an eye on it.
It is nice and soft, though. It's almost like a silicone. I mean, it's like it's
really
flexible. Very flexible, which I think some people probably really like.
Which is why that's in the name, Flexible Filly.
Oh, there you are. So what's the third one?
So the third one is the Green Guard Grazing Muzzle. This is my preferred muzzle. This is what I have on everybody. This is a plastic basket, so it's got a square base to it, and it's stiff. So it attaches on the noseband, both cheek pieces, and under the chin. It's got leather straps that it attaches with. So those are your breakaways. I still use a breakaway halter, but the basket, if they did get caught, they would break that off. This has different size. So on the bottom of the basket, it's either 4 or 5 oval-shaped holes going across the top. So there's 2 lines of holes. So instead of the 2 other baskets we talked about, just has 1 circle opening.
So this is like a grid, basically.
This is a grid of ovals across the bottom. And where it attaches on the sides and on the noseband, this looks like a Chinese food box to go, like the to-go box. It like opens up and there's got tabs. So the whole thing is stiff and it's open on each corner. So the ventilation in it is really good. And the pieces that are sticking up are also not solid. They also have ventilation through them. So this comes with, you can either purchase the basket by itself or you can purchase their halter. Their halter has a secondary attachment on it that goes down the front of the face, So it helps keep it centered on the horse's face. And it's one more way for them not to be able to eat out the side of it or to get it off.
Mm.
You can also make adjustments. I have a corner eater who likes to push the basket, sort of like your pony. He went out the top, mine goes out the bottom. So they have quite a few videos online. You can either use Velcro, or you can just use your baling twine and fill in the corners so that they can't eat out the side. There's quite a few adjustments because the leather straps that come with it have lots of holes in it, so you can adjust the distance from the horse's nose, and sometimes you do have to make a few adjustments to get it perfect. And then you can also use their halter that has this additional adjustment to keep it in place. So I didn't talk about the price point on the thin line. I think that it's around $80 or $88 for that one. Yeah. And then with the Green Guard, I'm totally off. I should have looked at all this before I called you or before we started this. I think that you can buy the muzzle and you can buy the halter separately. So if you want to use your own your own halter, you can just attach it, or you can buy their halter.
Yeah, they have a special halter, right, that you can kind of attach it.
Right.
Is that the halter? Does it have like a strip up the front of the face as well?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So it's got that strip up the front of the face, and you can take that off if you want to, and you don't have to use it. But like, I originally didn't use it and started having everybody being able to get out of their halters, get out of the muzzle. Really? So now I use them, and it just, they've really thought about this. Like, they've done the research on it to make sure
it works,
so like that it's going to stay on. So the muzzle itself is $99 with for just the muzzle. The other thing I really liked about Green Guard, they make inserts to go into your muzzles. So I have a little pony, I don't know, he's 10 hands or 11 hands or something. And I have it's a firm plastic insert, and it takes the holes on the inside and makes them smaller. So he is getting even less hay. So the restriction from the muzzle wasn't enough, and so he has the insert, and that makes them smaller. So he's even getting less grass than he would be getting with just the regular muzzle.
So it's a bit like when you buy a slow feed hay net, and they have like 1.5 inch holes and 1.25 inch hole hay nets and 3/4 inch hole hay nets. Like Green Guard, it sounds like, have got these inserts, so you can have just the kind of ovals the muzzle itself comes with, or inserts that make the holes gradually smaller depending on your need. That's kind of cool.
They also make 2 other inserts for people that are concerned about their horse's teeth, and I'm sure we're probably going to talk about this at some point. They do make a leather insert that'll go on top of the plastic so that your horse's teeth are not getting the same wear or having some protection rubbing against the softer leather than they would against the hard plastic.
So there is some people kind of worry that the hard plastic that's in the bottom of that muzzle, that if their horses are always eating against that with their incisors, that they could wear the enamel off the incisors. Is that right? That's the issue?
That is correct. And they do, I mean, if we're going to be completely honest, it does happen. My horses have wear on their front teeth. I will take some wear on my front teeth before I'll take laminitis. I just don't like, when you got to weigh the risks, I feel like having wear on your teeth is less of an issue.
And I feel like isn't that true of so much of horse keeping, right? I mean,
weighing the risk.
It's all just one big risk assessment. Horse care is like, I'm not sure there's any 100% risk-free horse management strategy. If anybody knows one, let us know.
And I do have the leather insert in. So I have the diet insert in the small pony, and then I have the leather insert into my other one, so that I do have both of those.
Okay. So, you own all 3 of these and have tried all 3 of these. So how do you pick which one to get? I mean, is it just a matter of trial and error? I mean, it sounds like, you've talked about, being able to breathe well and sweating and humidity and teeth and what. I mean, is it just sort of a matter of knowing your horse and watching your horse and just trial and error over time?
Yeah. I definitely think, like, if you can find somebody at your barn, or if you have a friend that has a muzzle, just start with whatever you can get your hands on first and give it a try. And your horse is going to have one. I mean, maybe your horse won't care about any of them.
Right.
Maybe one of them rubs a little bit. You have to make some adjustments. But yeah, it's pretty much just trial and error. Your horse is going to tell you. If you put it on, your horse goes right out and starts eating grass. I mean, great. You're good to go. But, there could be some issues with them and not liking them or being able to get them off.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to have to find one that fits.
Okay, so let's talk about fit. So I've got my hands on this muzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Now what, right? Because you've mentioned fit a couple of times. Like, how does that work? What does fit actually look like?
So every muzzle fits a little bit differently. And so I'm going to first start by saying, go on the manufacturer's website and read how it should be fitted properly. But I think a lot of people think that the muzzle goes right up. So you put it on and it's like touching the horse's lips. And that's not the case. So it's hanging down about 1.5 inches from the horse's teeth or from their mouth.
Okay. So if your horse is just standing with his head and neck in normal sort of position,
Mm-hmm.
not grazing,
Mm-hmm.
the muzzle is like suspended below the horse's muzzle.
That's correct. And so when they put their head down to the grass, they have to push down. I mean, they're not really pushing down, but they're going to push into it to get to the grass.
Yeah.
And so if it's not sitting there and you haven't actually taken the time to fit it properly, your horse might get upset because if it's not fitted properly, they're not going to be able to eat the grass. It's not going to work properly, and therefore they are going to get frustrated with it. So make sure that you read the manufacturer instruction. The other thing is that if it's not fitted properly, you might get rubs on the side of their face or around where the muzzle, like if it's touching too close. So I guess each one fits differently, but all of them are at least 1.5 inches hanging below the horse's lips when the horse is just standing there resting.
Okay. So that's good to know. So it sounds like spending some time online on the manufacturer's website kind of before you get going, before you can head out to the barn with your new muzzle is a good idea.
Yes.
Okay. So what are some other things to consider when you're when you're going to put a muzzle on a horse, and I assume there's some training involved. Like, we're not just going to put the muzzle on the horse and then just throw it out in the field and say good luck, right? I mean, there's some training.
People do that, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And then they wonder why their horse hates it. Well, they have no idea. They've been just going out and eating grass, and now all of a sudden they can't eat grass, and they're going to stomp at it, and they're going to run around. So what I do, or what I've done in the past, is I start by just putting some treats in it.
Mm-hmm.
And getting them used to putting their face in it and going, oh, okay, there's something in here. And then you can use baby carrots and stick them through the holes in it so that they have to press down so they can eat it because, it's hanging. So they're going to have to push down on your hand so the carrot comes up through those holes. I always start with them on a lead rope, and I do a little bit of training. So I'll have some treats with me. I try to pick a spot of grass that's really good. Usually it ends up being my front lawn, somewhere that's got not pasture grass, but delicious grass. And so the grass needs to be a certain height for them to eat out of it. So when you're first training them, you want to find grass that is, 4 inches. You don't want really tall grass. You don't want really short grass because they need to understand how the grass is going to come through. And I walk with them and let them put their head down like they would. And at first, I'll just drop a couple treats into the muzzle so that they automatically want to push down in hopes that when they push down to get the treats, some of the grass is going to come up, right? You're just kind of getting it started for them. Once they realize that works,
right?
It's all there. They got it.
So the grass kind of needs to be long enough to stick through the muzzle holes, but not so long that it's floppy, right? It needs to have some stiffness to it, right? So that it comes through
and it can,
the muzzle.
Yeah, it's not even that it's not floppy. So when your horse is walking along with the muzzle, they're not pushing down. They're kind of walking and they're pushing it forward. And if the grass is too long, the grass doesn't actually come up through the holes. So
Okay.
in the spring, great, the grass is coming up, not a big deal. By August, I'm out mowing because my grass is too tall and they can't eat through the muzzle. So when I set my brush hog or my field mower, I set it usually at like 8 or 10 inches. It's still pretty long. I mean, for anybody else, that sounds like a crazy amount, but
Right.
you're going to want to have, at least like 4 inches is still like pretty low. Like if you can get it somewhere between 6 and 10 inches, that's going to be the perfect height. If you
Okay.
turn them out and it's really long, they're going to get frustrated because they can't get it to come through the muzzle and they can't actually get the grass. It just folds over. And if
That
it's
makes
too
sense.
short, a lot of the muzzles are thicker, and so the grass actually doesn't come through.
If it's really short, that makes
Right.
sense. I
So
could see that being an issue with our Bermuda because, Bermuda is almost like carpet.
Right.
If it doesn't get long enough, like that might be an issue for us. I'll have to keep an eye on that if we end up going down the muzzle route this summer. That's good advice. What about like drinking? I'm assuming you make sure your guys can drink out of theirs before you just let them loose in them.
Correct. So if you have automatic waterers, you want to make sure that whatever muzzle you pick, that it fits into the waterer. So some field automatic waterers don't
there's
have
the Nelson waterers and things. That makes sense. Yeah, they're quite narrow, huh?
And there's a tube, I forget what it's called, but it's like a white tube that comes up. And so if you've got a square basket and a circular tube, that's not going to work.
You mean you can't get this square peg in the round hole?
Correct. So that's okay. I mean, couple options. Just put one tub of water out there, a skip bucket or whatever, a couple buckets. Just make sure that whatever their water source is, if you have automatic waterers, that they can do it. My horses never had any thoughts or any issues about sticking the muzzle into the water. Like that was never an issue. And my automatic waterers, my grazing muzzle baskets fit in. So,
right. But I would say it's worth making, like, get a bucket of water, play in the water, get your horse to put his nose in the bucket, try, make sure that that's not a thing for them, because that's the last thing you need is a horse that's happily eating grass, but then not drinking, and you end up with a colic situation.
And that's something else to think about is with that nylon one. Again, that's getting wet every time they're drinking. And if you're in a humid environment, that's not going to dry.
It's going to get heavier too. Yeah. I think we've said it already, but I'm just going to say it again. Like, you need to be attaching these to breakaway halters.
Yes, they have to be on breakaway halters.
Anytime a horse is in a halter in a field, muzzle or no muzzle, it needs to be a breakaway. Yeah, really, please.
Yeah.
I think we've all seen the nasty picture that goes around social media of the horse that has like their hind shoe caught in their nylon halter that wouldn't break.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just want to say one more thing about training them to use it. When you first take them out to the grass on the lead rope, they are going to paw at the ground a little bit. They are going to be a little bit, I don't want to say frustrated, but they don't understand it yet. So don't give up in that moment. Just keep working with it. Like, let them, you're going to have to look for the grass that looks like the appropriate length that will work for them to eat with. And just, walk them a little bit, let them put their head down. They are going to catch on to it really quickly. So don't get frustrated or don't think they're mad or sad when they start pawing at the ground. They'll figure it out.
They're processing. Actually, it reminds me of, what you hear about for our listeners that have children and have had the experience of maybe introducing slightly unusual foods to their children when they were little, like, or spicy food or like just different foods, right? You give your kid an avocado for the first time, right? They eat it and they're kind of like, oh, yay, food, put it in their mouth. And then you watch their face and they kind of screw their face up and they make all these faces that we as adults go, oh my goodness, they don't like avocado. And the reality is that this, 18-month-old, 2-year-old child or whatever is like, never had avocado before, and their brain is going, what is this? Like, this texture is weird, like the taste is strange, and like they have no social inhibitions, so they're just like, all the facial expressions, all the body expressions, all the things that we as, polite adults in adult society go, you don't make that face if you like your food. They clearly don't like that food. And then we immediately go, oh, the kid doesn't like avocado. And it's like, no, they're just processing the experience. They've never had this experience before. And so I think, I'm hearing you say it's very similar, right, for the horses when they get put in a muzzle for the first time. It doesn't mean they don't like the muzzle. They're just feeling the feels, having the experience, trying to figure out what it is, and they're trying to figure out how to make it work. And once they realize that it works and they can just eat grass the same as they normally do, they have no reason not to like it anymore, right? I mean,
that's exactly it.
It's fine. And I also want to say that, when I've run into clients who have, said to me, oh, my horse doesn't like his muzzle, there's been a couple of times where I've sort of said, well, I've been in the barn with the person, can you show me? Like, go get the muzzle and put the muzzle on the horse. And, they sort of come with the muzzle or the halter. They have a halter that's set up quite often, just has a muzzle on it all the time, right? It's not your day-to-day halter you groom the horse in. It's a halter they just go out in with the muzzle on. And so they come towards the horse holding this halter and say, let's say the horse is in their stall. And they go to walk towards the horse, and their body language, like, it's like they're sort of begging and stooping and kind of like walking towards the horse, looking at the ground with this like awkward body language, this sort of apologetic body language, which is like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I have to put this thing on you. And, that their whole body exudes this awkwardness, guilt and apologetic energy. And so the horse walks off to the back of the stall and stands in the corner looking into the corner of its stall. And the owner proclaims, see, I told you, the horse hates this muzzle. And I'm like, are you sure it's the muzzle and not you? Because you're being really weird right now, right? I mean, for horses that read body language, they're like, what the heck is wrong with my human? Right?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
You're behaving really strangely. Like, so just own it, right? Walk up to the horse like any other day of the week with your halter with the muzzle on, with a, carrot in your pocket or whatever. Walk up, throw a carrot in the bottom of the muzzle or whatever, put the halter on and be like, yay, we get to go out in the field. This is amazing, and
that's
the horse will be like, yay,
You have to give yourself some self-talk about
Yes.
how you are doing such a great thing for your horse, allowing him to go and eat this delicious grass and spend time with his friends. But like, I have Patrick, my feral little pony. I mean, when I got him, we couldn't even catch him. And so even now, I think I'm the only person that can get a halter on him. But when I go to put his halter on, he knows there's treats in that basket. Every single time I put 2 little treats in there, and every single time he sticks his nose right in, he says, yes, ma'am. He's so happy about it. There's just no issue. And if we can get it on him, we can get it on anybody.
Yeah, he's pretty feral. I mean, that's the thing. You've created a positive association, right? It's like, A, there's treats in the muzzle, and B, you now get to go out and eat grass, right? So anyway, so I mean, to that point, right, you've said to me, like, your ponies don't mind their muzzles and are quite happy. I guess, that's kind of how you know, right? I mean, like, feral Patrick doesn't mind.
He doesn't mind at all. First of all, I think he's really happy because he knows when he gets his muzzle on, he gets to get away from me, right? That's part of it.
And he goes, yes, go out, and exactly, gets lost in the field.
Yeah, there's just never a question. I've never looked at them and went, oh my gosh, you look so sad with that on. Like, ever.
And it hasn't had any effect on your relationship with your horses, right? I mean, like, they don't not want to come to you because you're carrying the muzzle, right? I mean, there's been no behavior changes, no interaction changes.
Nothing. Zero.
Right.
Nobody's upset. Nobody's sad. Nobody hates me. Nothing.
So how long do they wear their muzzles?
So in the summer, I turn out at 6 a.m. and I bring them back in at 9 p.m. and they have their muzzles on the entire time.
Wow.
So if they're in the dirt lot overnight, they wouldn't have their muzzles on. And if they come in their stalls, they're not going to have their muzzles on. But if they are on the grass, they're in their muzzles for however long they're going out.
I tell you something that I think just came to mind that I think is worth sharing with people because, I don't know if we have talked about this very much. I think we did briefly in our last episode talk about, introducing horses to pasture, right? And how we need to do that gradually. And you sort of do like 15 minutes, and then the next day you do 30 minutes, and the next day you do 45 minutes. And we talked a little bit about how that's kind of difficult if you like have to go to work and have a life to really do that. And I remember one year, you and I sat down, we were figuring out how to like introduce your horses to the pasture. And, we kind of had that research in hand that the muzzles can restrict their intake by up to 80%. And we sort of figured out that, if you can turn a horse out on pasture for 15 minutes without a muzzle, you could turn them out on the pasture with a muzzle for longer.
Correct.
Because you've reduced the amount of, they're not going to get the same amount of pasture in that 15 minutes if they would without their muzzle on. So actually, it becomes a really handy tool for helping introduce horses to pasture, because you can put them out for longer chunks of time and still be introducing them slowly to the pasture. So that's just something to think about for people.
Yeah, I start with 30 minutes. So I go 30 minutes. Next day I go 1 hour. I mean, if you have the inserts in, especially because the holes are so small. I pretty much doubled the time. So instead of 15, I did 30.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I do it. So yes, you can get them turned out a lot faster instead of doing your 15-minute increments, which I have done before in the past. And it definitely, if you're going to work, is not easy to do. And like you said in the last episode, trying to catch them after 15 minutes, no.
Yeah, that's a hand grazing situation. Let's be real.
They're not coming back.
So we've painted a pretty rosy picture of using muzzles, but, there are all these things often have challenges, right? So what challenges have you run into with your muzzles?
Yeah. So eating out of the side of them. I think that's definitely one of them. And again, it depends which muzzle you have. Using baling twine, we all have it sitting around. Like that's an easy thing to fix it. I've had my muzzles get caught before on the fence. So that's something like things can happen. It doesn't matter that I had it on a breakaway. It still got caught and it still bent the plastic on the muzzle on the side of it and it didn't break. So, you still have to check the integrity of the muzzles, even if you're on a breakaway when they come back in. Make sure that there's not any damage to them.
So is it worth having a spare? Like, do you have a spare?
I have 2 spares.
Of course you do. But it sounds like that is worth, if once you figure out your system and what works for you, getting a spare is perhaps a good idea.
Yeah, I think that definitely if you can find a used one online and just having a secondary one there.
That's
I
good,
have one of my spares has some damage to it, and so I replaced it, but I still keep it because in the event that I damage another one, I could always go back and use it. It's not non-functional.
Right.
Ponies that eat out of the side, I've had them eat so that the strap holding the basket on was in their mouth like a bit.
Oh.
So they got it all the way to the side. So, those kind of things. And then rubbing. So I had a Azteca gelding that had really thin skin. He was gray and he got a ton of rubs. The halter on his cheek pieces was actually rubbing more from having the basket on and the way he was eating. So, fuzzy pieces, adding stuff to it to make it fuzzy.
Like sheepskin. Yeah.
So I think that those kind of challenges, again, most of the manufacturers have some adjustments you can make to them to make sure the fit is correct or help if you have one of those Houdinis that can get out of them. But you do have to.
They're pretty helpful, right? I mean, the manufacturers, if you reach out to them, we found are pretty helpful.
They've all been super responsive to me. I know, so there's also a Facebook group called Slow Feeding Muzzle Grazing something. There's a Facebook group that specifically just you can go in there and you can ask questions. There is somebody on there that does muzzle fitting that will help you get your muzzle fitted. So
cool.
If you're really struggling, but I know that like Green Guard has quite a few videos on their Facebook page on how to fit it properly. So there is a lot of information out there.
Yeah. And just in case people don't know, when we're talking about halter fuzzies, they're often sold for shipping. They're like sheepskin tubes, basically, that with Velcro on that you can Velcro onto various parts of your halter, but they might be under shipping halters or halter fleece or something.
Halter fleece, and you can get sheepskin or you can get just fleece ones, and sometimes you have to put them in different places. Like this horse specifically was pretty sensitive, and so I had them on his cheek pieces, I had them on his nose band, but then my horse that I've had using a muzzle for years has never ever needed anything.
Right.
I've never put fuzz on it. So it just depends. You're going to have to just assess the situation as you go through. And I think that also has to do with your climate, if you're in a climate that they're sweating underneath it too.
That makes sense. So you recently came across an unexpected benefit of having your muzzle ponies trained to wearing muzzles. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
I like that you called it a benefit. That's funny.
I know. It's been that. Poor
Jill.
So
both of my horses have been suffering from a respiratory issue since January, and it has gotten to the point that we've had to start nebulizing them. And I was a little bit worried starting with Patrick, who is feral. You know, I keep saying he's feral. He sort of leads. I mean, he gets his feet done and we can pick up his feet sort of to get them trimmed, but he's certainly not very manageable. And
he is a rescue. So we should throw out that this is not because you have had him his whole life and have never done anything. Like, he's a rescue.
He is a rescue. He doesn't have vision on one side of his body. His one eye doesn't have any vision in it. So, you know, some things, trying to do things with him can be challenging. And when we decided we were going to start nebulizing, I just thought, you know, this could be a struggle. And so same thing, I went and got the treats and I dropped them in there. And honestly, because he was trained to use his grazing muzzle, he didn't care at all about the nebulizer. He stuck his nose right in and stood there with the nebulizer on. I'm like, of all things to be scared of, it's not the nebulizer. But that is a benefit. If you get into a situation that your horse has to be nebulized, they would already be trained and be used to putting their muzzle into something.
Yeah. Another thing that's similar to a muzzle that I don't see used very often, but I think is pretty clever. It's something we used to use a lot. I call them nose bags. I don't know what they get called. Other people call them, but like basically they're like canvas bags that you can put your horse's grain in, and you know, typically has like a leather strap that kind of goes up over like a crown piece. It kind of goes up over and buckles to the other side, and you can put their grain in it and they eat it. And I was once at a facility in Montana, and the woman had about 10 horses out in a massive, probably like 50-acre pasture, and they all appeared in the by the gate. And she kind of had a little like area that she could shut the gate and shut them in this, you know, smaller yard area. And she had all of her nose bags. They were all black and they had colored ribbons on, so she knew which went to each horse. And they were all so trained that they stood there like in order, and she put the boss mare's one on first, and she went down the whole herd and put their nose bags on. Some of them just got a carrot. Some of them were getting, you know, a couple of pounds of you know, grain or whatever. And she put all these on and went off and did chores for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then came back when they'd all finished, took their bags off. And I thought, what a genius way of, you know, feeding a group of horses in a group situation without, you know, putting buckets on the ground and they're pushing each other off their feed. And you got to stand there for 30 minutes while the slow one finishes, you know, fending off the other horses. And she had, you know, obviously it taken a bit of training and a bit of time, but kind of genius. And I've had a couple other people you know, use it when I've suggested it to them, and it's worked really well for them. So that's something else for, you know, similar to a muzzle that you could do if your horse is comfortable in a muzzle.
Well, I think the one thing we also didn't talk about is horses eating hay with muzzles on. So when you had said about the mixed herd, there is a lot of people, and I see this on that Facebook group, that either have minis that are turned out in a mixed herd. And so there might be a round bale. And obviously, if you put a mini on a round bale,
you end up with that picture, that meme that goes around the internet of the pony's butt sticking out of the round bale.
Correct. So there's lots of people that actually use a muzzle if they have either too high quality of hay, if they're in a mixed herd situation.
Yep.
If their ponies, you know, they're trying to get more time on hay because they don't get that much to eat. You know, you've got metabolic horses that are having, you know, you need to slow down how fast they're eating, but they can be used with hay. So that is another time that people do use them. And it's pretty common from what I've seen online. There's a lot of people that are using grazing muzzles with their hay. So that's
Especially, I would imagine that the Green Guard one with the grid on the bottom, I would imagine would work quite well with hay. The one with just a single hole in the bottom might be more of a challenge, but I imagine that grid would work pretty easily with hay.
I've never done it. Everybody knows, we've talked about it 1,000 times. I've got junky hay that's got no nutrition in it, so my horses just eat what they want. But certainly if I had good quality hay, and Patrick being as small as he is, I probably would have to look into that. So that is another option that you may find yourself needing it for hay also.
Yeah. Again, a good situation if you've got horses living together where you have those hard keepers that you just like don't need any excuse to slow their consumption down, but you've got them living with an easy keeper that, can't do the free fed type of thing. So yeah, lots of opportunity there. So I'm hoping that we've made people consider muzzles and given them lots of reasons to not feel guilty about muzzles, and some, tools and tips and tricks that they feel armed and able to go, out to the barn with a muzzle and introduce their horse to them. So hopefully we'd love to hear if you go out and you try, if you muzzle your horse already, or if you're thinking about it, we'd love to, have you share your experiences with us on our social media.
Yes, definitely reach out if you have struggles. Maybe we have some solutions for you, or we can just give you a pep talk, like on your way out there with the grazing muzzle.
Jill
Message me. Yeah. I'll coach you the whole way there.
Yeah. Jill's on a mission to have people not feel guilty.
Put your muzzles on. Everybody needs to.
If you're walking out and you're feeling guilt, Facebook message us, and we'll try to give you some psychological support to help you get out there and feel better about it.
The other thing I was going to say is that I did reach out to both Green Guard and Thin Line to let them know that we were going to be doing this episode. They did give us discount codes, so we will put those in the show notes. So if you are looking at purchasing a muzzle for your horse, we will have those discounts listed in the show notes for you. For our listeners, if you'd like to be a part of our conversation, please send your suggestions for future topics and equine nutrition questions to info@scoopandscale.com. And is spelled out. You can also find Claire at clarityequine.com.
We know that if you're like us, you're probably listening to this while driving or doing barn chores. But when your hands are free, if you'd share it with your friends on social media, and be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, it helps other horse lovers like you to find us.
For the Scoop and Scale podcast, I'm Jill Jackson.
And I'm Dr. Claire Tunis.
Thanks for riding along with us.